They say love knows no age. They say the heart wants what it wants. But what happens when that desire shatters everything you thought you knew about yourself, about loyalty, trust, and who you're allowed to be attracted to? This is my story. I'm 64 years old. And yes, he was 27. I know how it sounds. I know what you might be thinking. But let me tell you everything before you judge. It started out harmless. At least that's what I told myself. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't chasing anyone. At my age, I thought I had already experienced everything I could when it came to love, loss, and life. But apparently, life had other plans. His name was Mason. I met him at my niece's wedding. He was her fiancé's best friend. That kind of charming, good-looking guy you'd expect to see in a movie. Tall, sharp eyes, that easy smile that could melt ice, and young, very young. 27. I laughed about it later, telling myself, I noticed because I used to work in human resources. I was trained to read people, to spot personalities, energy, presence. That was all it was, just observation. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something the moment he looked at me. Not just a look, he really looked, like he saw me. And not the version of me I wear to get through the day. Not the polite woman, not the quiet widow, not the older woman people treat like a footnote at social events. He saw me. And for the first time in years, I saw myself again. We talked at the reception. He offered me a drink. I told him I don't really drink anymore. He smiled and said, "Then we'll share a soda and talk like civilized rebels." We sat under the twinkle lights talking about music, about books, about travel. It was effortless. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel invisible. That night, I went home and stared at myself in the mirror. Really stared. It had been years since I saw myself like that, noticing the shape of my jaw, the texture of my skin, the little lines around my eyes. I wasn't trying to erase my age. I was just trying to understand why I suddenly cared again. Days passed, weeks even. I figured it was just a blip. One magical evening that didn't mean anything. Until he called. Apparently, he got my number from my niece. Said he wanted to take me to lunch. He said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. I told him, "Mason, I'm flattered, but I'm old enough to be your mother." And he laughed, said, "Good thing I'm not looking for a mother." I should have hung up right there, but I didn't. We went to lunch, a little outdoor cafe in the city. I wore a pale blue dress I hadn't touched in years. I felt silly, but excited. That lunch turned into weekly meetups. We talk about everything: philosophy, family, regrets, the things we never say out loud. And I started to realize he wasn't just charming. He was smart, empathetic, curious, and he listened. Somewhere along the way, friendship turned into something else. I knew it was happening. I felt the lines blurring, but I didn't want to admit it. Until the night he kissed me. We were walking, along the river walk, watching the water shimmer under the city lights. He touched my arm and I turned to say something, and suddenly, there it was. The kiss. Soft, unexpected, real. I froze. My mind screamed, "This is wrong. This is crazy. What are you doing?" But my heart hadn't felt alive in years. Pulled away, breathless. I told him we couldn't do this. I told him it wasn't right. He just said, "I'm not here for right or wrong. I'm here for what's real." And that scared me more than anything. Because what we had was real. But it came at a price. I had been married once. My husband passed away 10 years ago. And after that, I just shut off. I buried myself in routines, in the roles people expected me to play. Mother, grandmother, neighbor, volunteer, but never woman, never lover. With Mason, I felt everything I thought I'd lost. Desire, passion, adventure. But I also felt guilt, shame, confusion. Because what do you do when the person making you feel alive is half your age? And worse, what if someone finds out? I kept our relationship hidden. No one would have understood. Not my friends, not my children, not the world. I imagined the headlines in their heads. Desperate old woman clings to youth. But it wasn't about youth. It was about connection. He didn't make me feel young. He made me feel seen. And I hadn't realized how starved I was for that. Of course, secrets like that don't stay buried for long. One afternoon, I was walking through the farmer's market with Mason. He reached for my hand, just casually, lovingly. And wouldn't you know it, my neighbor saw us. Later that evening, she called. "Oh, honey, I didn't know you had a boyfriend," she said, her voice syrupy and sharp. I didn't even deny it. I just said, "It's complicated." And she said, "It always is when they're that much younger, isn't it?" The gossip spread like wildfire. My phone rang constantly. Some people were curious, others were cruel. My son called me angry and confused. He said, "Mom, what are you doing? He's closer to my age than yours." I didn't have an answer. I just knew I wasn't ready to give Mason up. But life has a funny way of reminding you that it doesn't let you off the hook that easy. One evening, Mason sat across from me, unusually quiet. I asked what was wrong. He looked at me for a long time and said, "Do you think I'm just a phase?" I was stunned. I asked him what he meant. He said, "Everyone thinks I'm using you, or that you're just escaping loneliness. But I care. About you. This isn't a game for me." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did believe him. But deep down, I also knew we were living in a bubble, a beautiful, fragile bubble. And bubbles burst. A few weeks later, he told me he had been offered a job out of state. A real opportunity, something big. He hesitated to take it, said he didn't want to leave me. And that's when I made the decision for both of us. I told him he had to go, that he deserved to build his life without the weight of our secret relationship. He cried. I did too. We spent one last night together. No words, just quiet understanding. A goodbye without saying goodbye. And then he left. I've seen him once since then. Just once. A few years ago, in a bookstore of all places. He smiled. I smiled. We hugged. He whispered, "You were my awakening." And I whispered back, "You reminded me I was still alive." We didn't exchange numbers, didn't make promises. We just parted ways, two souls grateful for the chapter we shared. So yes, I'm 64, and he was 27. Was it wrong? Maybe. Was it love? Maybe not in the way most people understand. But it was real. And I won't apologize for it. Because in a world that so often tells women to shrink, to disappear, to fade after a certain age, I chose to feel, to risk, to live. And if nothing else, that counts for something. This wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a tragedy either. It was just life. Raw, complicated, beautiful. And sometimes, the messiest stories are the ones worth remembering. Thank you for listening.